It says, Moreover, the word of the Eternal came unto me, saying, He said, Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyre. And you say to him, Thus saith the Eternal, You sealed up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You have been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, the sardius, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of your tabrets and of your pipes was prepared in you in the day that you were created. You are the anointed cherub that covers, and I have set you so. You were upon the holy mountain of God. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created until iniquity was found in you. By the multitude of your merchandise they have filled the midst of you with violence, and you have sinned. Therefore I will cast you as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You have corrupted your wisdom by reason of your brightness. I will cast you to the ground. I will lay you before kings, that they may behold you. You have defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquity, and by the iniquity of your traffic. And therefore I will bring forth a fire from the midst of you, and it shall devour you. And I will bring you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold you. All they that know you among the people shall be astonished at you, and you shall be a terror, and never shall you be any more. Now that's a story about Satan. So Ezekiel now, and he's writing this down. And I think here's another popular fairy tale. I'll just bring it to your attention. The general belief or concept among religious people, at least, is that the Bible is written by a lot of old-timey Jewish writers, that they're all Jewish writers, and that they lived at various times, and they contradict each other constantly. They don't have a coherent story, and that these writers were writing about life and writing about history from their perspective in time, and that they made a lot of mistakes. A lot of errors are in the Bible, just full of mistakes. That's the general conception. Now, the plain truth of the matter is, from the biblical point of view, the Bible does not say that at all. The Scripture says all Scripture is given by inspiration of God. There isn't one word in the Bible that's written by any old-timey Jewish writer. Not a word. Well, if we assume that the Bible is telling us the truth. Of course, that's a question to be decided. The religious people will tell you that the Bible is not trustworthy. And that always perplexed me. If I was reading the encyclopedia and I had it in my mind that the encyclopedia was not trustworthy, then I wouldn't read it. I tend to believe what I see in the encyclopedia until somebody can come to me and show me, well, the encyclopedia made a mistake there. Now, if you could point out some mistake here in the Scripture, we'd be happy to entertain that. I haven't seen any. I've looked hard. I've looked at a lot of these alleged errors in the Scripture. And when you complete them out, there's no error there at all. Now, the Scripture says that all Scripture, that's every word, is given by inspiration of God. It's profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, and instruction. And here's a little piece of it. Jesus said that man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Here's a little story in Ezekiel 28, verses 11 through 19. See, that's about 8 verses, isn't it? And here's what these 8 verses tell us. Satan was created. He has not been around forever and ever. God, on the other hand, says, I'm without beginning and I am without end. Well, that's a mouthful. Now, you've never met anybody like that, somebody that's without beginning and without end. In our physical realm, in the physical universe that we find ourselves, there's a beginning and there's an end. And the Bible tells you that the beginning was, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and that's the beginning. So if you want to know when the beginning was, there was a time when there was no physical matter, period. And there was a time when this God existed before physical matter, because he says, I created all that physical matter out there. I did that. I know somebody's going to say, well, I don't believe that, but I already covered that. I said, just because you don't believe it, does it make it true or false? Does your belief in something make that true or false? And, the world's been around for a long time, and there have been people that believe that you'll never be able to fly, and so here we are flying. And the smallest unit of matter is a molecule, but we found out, no, there's smaller pieces of matter that are smaller than a molecule, and so on down the line. There's beliefs that have been going on for thousands of years that, over a period of time we find out, well, we were wrong about that. What I believe isn't necessarily going to be the last word on the subject. I have beliefs, but my beliefs don't make the subject true or false. I don't have that power. Now listen to this. Let's just run down the list here. Satan was created. Iniquity developed and manifested itself in him. Satan was in the government. Satan was cast out of the government. Satan was beautiful. Satan was created. He had a beginning. Satan was perfect. All right, now that's what we know about him just from those 8 verses. Is that just the embodiment of evil, or is that a description of a literal person, a literal being, who can be destroyed, who hasn't always existed? There was a time when there was no Satan, and then there was a time when God created him, named him Lucifer. Lucifer became Satan, the adversary, by his actions. That's not a description of some abstract philosophy. That is a literal description of a being. Somebody describes him, tells you about him. Now in Isaiah 14, verses 12 through 15, there's a little bit more to the story. It starts off by saying, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit." All right, so here's a description of hell, the sides of a pit or a grave. You're going to be brought down to that. Now, what was this controversy all about? Satan, who was a member of the government, let's say, in today's parlance, he was the Secretary of State. He was a pretty high-ranking official in the government of God. God has 24 elders that he uses in his government. Today, President Obama has a bunch of people that he meets with every now and again. We call them the cabinet. And each one of these cabinet officers heads a branch of the government. Evidently, God has a government that's headed by creatures that have heads over certain branches of it, certain parts of it. Satan was a part of that. And one day he said, "I'm not satisfied with being the Secretary of State. I want to be the president. I'm going to lead a rebellion, and I'm going to take over the government. I'm going to throw God off of his throne. I'm taking over, and I'm going to run it." Now remember, this is a monarchy. God is called a king. And he's been there for forever, and he's been the king forever. In fact, everything around him, he made it. He made the heavens and the earth. He made the angels. He made the 24 elders, all of these creatures that you see here. He tells you here in the Scriptures, he says, "I made all of them." In the Garden of Eden, he made Adam and Eve, introduced himself, and said, hey, wake up over there. I made you. I'm the boss. I own you by virtue of the creation. And Adam and Eve, they listened to a guy named Satan, came along one day, and he said, hey, this guy God over here is lying to you. He's a liar. And you ought not to believe him, and you ought to go over there and take off of that tree. Now, the owner of the tree said, don't do that. So Adam and Eve were a couple of thieves, and they went over and they stole off the tree and dishonored their only parent. Violated the first commandment by following the instructions of a foreign and alien god, committed an act of treason against their creator, and as a result of that, they got kicked out of the garden. And there was a cause and effect relationship here with their actions and the actions of this being that we call Satan. There was an inter-reaction. Now, the embodiment of good and evil is a philosophy. No, we come up with philosophical ideas. Those are abstract ideas. They don't literally exist. You don't really physically have an abstract idea or philosophy. It's something that you believe, but it isn't a literal person. But what we're discussing here is a literal person. At least that's what I get out of it. You can read it for yourself and decide what you get out of it, but there's reality out here, boys and girls. Now, in the New Testament, now for you Christians out there, you can listen to this because this is in the New Testament. See, you've been taught that you can't believe the Old Testament and you can't trust it because that's Old Testament and that's bad, wicked, terrible, awful, and evil. Jesus didn't know that because he said, man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And when he said that, he was alive. And when Jesus was alive, not one word of the New Testament had been penned yet. So Jesus wasn't turning over to 1st and 2nd Thessalonians or Revelation or Acts or Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to get his wit and wisdom. They had not been written yet. And all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, so the Scripture tells us. And therefore Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John didn't write a word. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were 4 secretaries who took dictation. The guy that wrote it was the creator. The secretaries and scribes wrote it down and preserved it. That's their role. Now, the preserving of the original text down to today, but over here in the book of Matthew, let's take a look at a few statements here. In Matthew 4, verses 1 through 11, there's a story. Let's take a look at that and see what we get. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterwards and hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If you be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. But Jesus answered and said, It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So then the devil took him up into the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple. And he said to him, Well, if you be the Son of God, cast yourself down, because it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning you, and in their hands they shall bear you up, lest at any time you shall dash your foot against a stone. And Jesus said unto him, It is written again, You shall not tempt the Lord your God. So again the devil took him up into an exceeding high mountain, and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world. Showed him the Roman Empire. He showed him the Egyptian Empire, and the Indian Empire. He showed him everything. And he said, All of these things will I give you, if you will fall down and worship me. Then saith Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. And then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him. Now here's a conversation. Here's Jesus talking to somebody. Is he talking to himself? Is he talking to an abstract thought? Is he talking to the embodiment of evil? You know, the text there is pretty plain and straightforward. There's somebody comes out here. Now you can sit there and say, Well, I don't believe it. Okay. I pointed that out before. There's a lot of things that go on in the world that you don't believe. But your belief doesn't make it true or false. That's the bottom line to that. So whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. What we're talking about here, is this a literal being? Is the author of Matthew 4, verses 1 through 11, trying to convey to you that this is an abstract thought and that this guy doesn't exist? If that's his goal here, he's a pretty poor writer. He has not conveyed that, to my mind, in that section of Scripture. In Luke 10, verse 18, he said to them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Now, when I went to Sunday school, went to catechism, Pastor Kohler said that man fell in the Garden of Eden. Here's another fairy tale. Man made a bad choice. He did not fall. Satan fell. Well, that's what Luke 10:18 says. And he said to them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. In Revelation 2, verse 9, I know your works and tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. The congregation of, the group of, the church of Satan. Not the embodiment of evil. They actually belong to a group of people that worship Satan. In 3:9 it says the same thing. Behold, I'll make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before your feet and to know that I have loved you. And in Revelation 12, verse 4, And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. This is where this 1/3, you want to know how many angels followed Satan in his rebellion? Well, it was 1/3. Tells you right there. Not only is Satan a real person, but he's got 1/3 of all of the angels that God has created so far involved in this rebellion with him. How do you like that? Does that sound like an embodiment of evil? Or is that a description of a rebellion that has or is in the process of being put down? A little bit more here. In Revelation 12, verse 9, that great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. And he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So as members of the government of God, out in the universe, wherever they are, third heaven, out there in the north, someplace, they were cast out, and they fell to the earth. Revelation 20, verse 2, he says, And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which was the devil, and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. This guy Satan is going to be imprisoned for 1,000 years, and then at the end of the 1,000 years, in Revelation 20, verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Now, do we lock up abstract ideas in prison? Do we release these abstract ideas from prison? I mean, come on. I haven't covered everything about him. You can do that yourself. Do a code bleed yourself. Pull out the word Satan and Lucifer and Dragon and Serpent and Devil and Lightbringer, these various names, and then look them up in a concordance, and then just look them up in the Scripture and read it for yourself. And I think it'll tell you a story. And just your common sense. I mean, I don't have to go to the Pope to get permission now to read the Bible. No, you Catholics do. So don't you do that without permission, though. But for some of the rest of you rebel Protestants out there, why don't you pick up the Scripture for yourself and take a look at that and see if, in fact, this guy Satan, the devil, Lucifer, as a real live guy. All right, I'm out of time. I'm going to have to wrap it up there. Thanks for listening, everybody, and good night, friends.